Monday, September the 28th. Could I please have the roll call?
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Berenson.
Present.
Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Circo, absent. Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Present.
Councilmember Townsend.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no presentations or awards this evening or personal appearances, so we'll move on to staff reports. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Krass to make a staff report for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I have submitted my monthly written report. I really do not have anything additional to add to that at this time, but I am available if council has any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Mr. Holman.
Just a comment, I wanted to thank Public Works. They've been out striping the highway lately. If you've been on 58, it looks superb. Excellent job. I called Mr. Fearborn last week and expressed my appreciation, but it really means a lot, especially this time of year when we get those blinding rainstorms at night or when we move into snowstorms. Boy, you can't tell what lane you're in. It looks really sharp. The city looks good.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Mr. Krass. I would ask Mr. Mustine to make a staff report for Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, members of the council, I've also submitted a written staff report. Just a couple things to highlight. This past weekend at Hawk Ridge Park on Saturday, we hosted the 18th annual Memorial Fishing Derby, and we had over 30 kids participate. Not a whole lot of big fish were caught, but I think they had a lot of fun, a lot of prizes given out. So I want to thank Corinne, our recreation coordinator, and our park staff who always volunteer for that. They just like fishing, and so I don't have to press too hard to get them to show up for that one. Our movie night this week is Friday night at Centerview on the patio. Starts at 6:30, and hopefully it'll be dark enough in time we won't have to stall too long on the west side of the building there to get it started outside. Also, the Memorial Park, the lights at the Arboretum have been installed and should be working, so if you're not in too much of a hurry to get home to the game tonight, you can drive by and see the lights down at the park. As you all remember, we received a grant in the amount of $28,000 for the playground surfacing at Memorial Park. That project is complete. We have received the reimbursement, so we are finalized on that project, so it turned out really well. And one more thing is the fountain at Johnston Lake should, it's been ordered. It should begin installation within the next couple weeks and get that thing going. So that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Mr. Berenson.
Thank you. What's the movie they're playing Friday night?
It is the newest Star Wars. I can't think of the last name. Mr. Holman might be able to help me with that.
It's not the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
All right, thank you.
Family friendly.
Anyone else have anything for Mr. Mustine? Thank you. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Mr. Mustine. Just a reminder to the council members and the mayor that we do have a work session next Monday night, October 5th, 2020. Two items currently on the agenda. Discussion of the fiscal year 2021 budget prior to the first reading of the budget the following week. And staff will be updating the city council. As I had briefed you, we have begun the long and arduous task of redoing the comprehensive plan for the city. The first part of that is reviewing and renewing the strategic plan that is the guiding document for the comprehensive plan. And so we will be presenting staff recommendations for changes to the strategic plan, things that have been completed, things that have become obsolete since our first round through that, go through it in detail with the council. Then we would like to be following up with all of the boards, the commissions, and the council at the very beginning of November to discuss that strategic plan and the comprehensive plan process. That will then be followed up with community meetings. That concludes staff reports tonight, and everyone's available for questions if the council has any.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
The next item is our consent agenda. We only have the one item on there, and that's the council meeting minutes of September the 14th. I entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve consent agenda item A, city council minutes for September 14, 2020.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0, and one absent. We'll now move on to unfinished business. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3570 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3570 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the zoning map from R1 Single Family Residential District to PUD Planned Unit Development District, a 23-acre tract of land located east of Washington Street and north of Ramblewood Subdivision in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve Bill 3570, Oak Ridge Farms rezoning from R1 to PUD.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion been made and seconded to approve for the second reading of Bill 3570. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Can I please have the second reading of Bill 3568 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3568 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Dana F. Cole and Company, LLP, to serve as the independent auditor for the city for a 3-year period.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve Bill 3568, award of contract auditor.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3568. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3569 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3569 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Piper Sandler and Company to serve as the independent financial advisor to the city for a 3-year period.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve Bill 3569, award of contract financial advisor.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3569. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. And the last item under old business is, could I please have the second reading of Bill 3571 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3571 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Olson for the Ward Road Surveying Project, City Project Number 2360302, in the amount of $40,200, and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders within established budget constraints.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve Bill 3571, award of contract Ward Road surveying.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3571. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Now move on to new business. Can I please have the first reading of Bill 3572 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3572 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the zoning map from A Agricultural District to R1P Single Family Residential Plan District, a 155-acre tract of land located west of North Madison Street and south of 163rd Street in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. This item requires a public hearing. I will open the public hearing at this time, and I would ask for a staff report.
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Bill 3572 is a request, a rezoning request that was filed by Joe Duffy. He's representing Parkside Investments, LLC. The request is to reclassify the zoning of 155 acres from agricultural to R1 Plan District. This is for a property that's located on the it's west of North Madison Street and generally south of 163rd Street. The land use plan map and our growth management plan does designate this property as appropriate for low-density residential development. In our thoroughfare plan, the major street plan designates 163rd Street and North Madison Street as major collector roadways, and then Sunset Lane would be a minor collector roadway. Rezoning request does require a public hearing that was advertised for this evening. I do want to enter into the record the notices that were sent to all the adjoining property owners of the hearing. Notice of publication in the Journal newspaper, our Unified Development Code, the application filed by Mr. Duffy, our growth management plan, and the staff report submitted this evening. Briefly, just looking at the surrounding zoning, to the north and to the west of the proposed rezoning area is the Creekmore subdivision, which is zoned PUD plan unit development. There are 3 tracts of land north of the proposed rezoning that have frontage on Madison Street that are currently zoned agricultural. Then to the south, we have Hawk Ridge Park, which is zoned Parks and Recreation. We have Madison Creek subdivision, which is zoned R1. And then we have a 10-acre tract of land that has frontage again on Madison Street that is zoned agricultural. And then all the property to the east, on the east side of Madison Street, is zoned rural estate. With the rezoning request, we did have a good neighbor meeting held back in July. We had 17 residents attend that meeting, and all of the questions that were asked and the responses given by the applicant provided in your staff report. The proposed zoning request has gone through a lot of changes. The developer actually started meeting with staff back in 2018. And the initial request that came in, or the initial discussion, centered around a mixed-use development. He was talking at that time single-family homes, 2-family homes that actually had an area for multifamily dwelling units. And that's what prompted the request for the PUD zoning. Typically, when you have a mixture of uses and on a tract of land like that, the PUD zoning is what works best. As a reminder, Creekmore, when it came in, has PUD zoning because that was a mixed-use development when it first came in. They had, of course, single-family, they had 2-family areas, and they had multifamily areas. They've eliminated the multifamily in Creekmore and have eliminated most of the 2-family to date. They still have some undeveloped land that still would allow 2-family if they desire to go that way. But again, that's why we looked at the PUD zoning for the subject property initially. Over the next couple of years, all the way up until the time when we had the Good Neighbor meeting, discussions continued. The Good Neighbor meeting, the plan at that time, still PUD zoning, but it was only single family, and he had dropped the overall density considerably to the property. It was after the Good Neighbor meeting when the applicant placed a hold on the review. With the PUD zoning, what's important about that is you also have the requirement of a preliminary plan as part of that. So it's in essence a preliminary plat goes along with the zoning. So with the preliminary plan, you have to have all of your studies completed. You have to have your Army Corps jurisdictional letter, because in this case we have a couple of stream corridors crossing through the property. He decided at that point to place a hold on the application, and staff would not have allowed the application to move forward because we didn't have all the documents yet. A month later in August, he made the determination to switch. We're no longer talking mixed use, so we didn't need the PUD zoning. So that's when he came in and started, which is zoned at R1. It's all single family. And so we made the switch to the R1 request, which does not require the preliminary plan. So he's able to move forward with the zoning, try to get the zoning in place, and then he would follow up with a preliminary plat as step 2. Now with the separation of the preliminary plat, we have to go back through the process of a Good Neighbor meeting and public hearings in front of the Planning Commission and Council for preliminary plat if the zoning gets changed. The plan district overlay is being requested. Initially when he came in with this plan, most of the lots were all conforming to our R1 standards, which is our typical single-family subdivision. He has one small pocket area where he was looking at incorporating narrow lots as part of one of the phases, very similar to what Eastbrook at Creekmore is currently building off of Madison Street, which is narrower lots, single-family detached. But because of that part of the overall development, which is why we have the plan district request, because it does modify the standards of R1 for that area. Part of his request for the planned district, there is a code requirement that certain design elements be incorporated in the overall construction of the subdivision, as well as amenities. And so if the rezoning is approved with the planned overlay, at the preliminary plat is when you'll see the list of the design elements and the common area and amenities that he's proposing as part of that preliminary plat. And that, again, would be spelled out in detail in a memorandum of understanding that would be done at that time. The engineering division did review the rezoning request, have determined that there are adequate public facilities are in place to serve the development. Planning Commission has submitted proposed findings of fact for your consideration on this request. I note under the recommendation area of the staff report, again, the property's been planned for low-density, single-family development for 25 years. The current ag zoning of the property has been in place since it was annexed into the city. It's really just a placeholder until development would occur on the property. The request and the proposed development of this property, as I explained it, to me, it's a textbook example of infill development, completely surrounded by single-family development or soon-to-be single-family development. And as I've noted in the report, the ideal long-term use of this property is not agricultural, it is residential. The Planning Commission on September 15th did vote 8-0 to accept the proposed findings of fact and forward this rezoning application to the council with a recommendation of approval. I didn't include in your packet the minutes from the September 15th meeting. There was considerable discussion by the commission and input by the residents and neighbors on the application, so I have shared that with you. Mr. Duffy and his engineer are in the audience if you have any questions, and that concludes staff report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of staff? Mr. Holman?
Question on the map, Mr. Carteret. Sunset will come up here on the right side of Johnston Lake as part of the bond project. Where's 163rd on there, which I'm just not picking it out.
No, that is correct. So the northern boundary of the subject property is 163rd Street. The property is actually bisected in half by what would be Sunset Lane extended.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Would the developer care to talk, the applicant care to speak to the council at this time? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Yeah, you need to turn it on, sorry. There you go.
Yes, my name is Joe Duffy, and I'm a developer north of the river at this point in time, and this is a piece of ground I've been looking at for a couple of years. It's a very pretty piece of ground. I think I've got everybody pleased. The park department and I reached an agreement about the ground they want. The neighbors are okay. I think there's some that still, would prefer it not to be anything developed on it, and I understand that. But I'm primarily here tonight to see if any of you have any questions of me, that if you have any doubts or anything about what I'm trying to do, because your staff has treated me great. We've gone through, done a lot of, it has not been a fast, and that's been on me more than on your staff. Okay. So, but I think we have a great plan in place, and it is a perfect place for a single-family subdivision because it's surrounded on all sides by single-family subdivisions. Sure. Immediately north is Creekmore, which is a great project and will benefit. And on the south, the city just invested a whole lot of money in a beautiful park. So those are all great things for me. So.
All right, sir. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Duffy? Yes, Mr. Berenson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I don't think it's required by code. I was reading through some of the questions in the Good Neighbor meeting. Although it's not required by code, you've got some neighbors that are farmers. Any plans to, I know this is early and this is just rezoning, but any plans to add any kind of a buffer between the proposed neighborhood and any of the other property owners?
Well, at this point, no. But as I see this property developing, it will develop from west to east. And so most of the farming neighbors are on the east side close to Madison. So I think we will kind of address that as we get closer to that. I will be very interested in providing some sort of a buffer between my project and a farm, because although people really like to back to a farm, quite frankly, but it will be good things, and I think they're afraid we're going to try to run them out, and that is not our intent at all. So we'll probably give a little extra lot depth there and that sort of thing, and some landscaping, that type of thing.
I know the farm to the south is a very active farm, and they've got hogs and chickens and quite a few animals there, so I would hate to see anything impede his ability to keep doing what he's doing right now. So that was my biggest concern with this.
And I'm fine with what he's doing. I have no objection to that. And
so when we get down this is, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but when we get down far enough, you'll show us or have an idea of how to maybe propose a buffer for that then.
yes,
All right, Mr. Duffy, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
no problem.
Anyone else have anything? Thank you, sir.
Certainly.
As this is a public hearing, anyone from the public that cares to step forward and address the council on it, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kenneth Filer. My address is 806 North Madison. We can't stop the growth, and it was never my intent. How can we be opposed to the growth when we were a part of it 3 years ago? So we are a part of Raymore's ever-changing numbers and population. We knew this day was going to come, and to us it was a double-edged sword. For us, it would be more families that would become our neighbors and become our friends, and then as well as our customers. The flip side of that is the fear or the potential of constant complaints. However, from the last P&Z meeting, the city staff put our concerns at ease, because basically we were there first, and as long as I don't do anything illegal, we're going to be okay. We're still concerned about the backyard rainwater runoff that may cross the property lines and allow lawn or pest treatment to pollute our areas that we use to raise pastured hogs, chickens, rabbits, and turkeys. And that's my only concern. Otherwise, I'm all for it. I know it's going to happen. I look forward to meeting new neighbors. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else to care to address the council at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend?
I'm moving that we approve the first reading of Bill 3572, Parkside Subdivision Rezoning.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3572. Any further discussion? Mr. Holman?
Just to address Mr. Filer's comments, typically stormwater runoff is addressed in preliminary or final plat, Mr. Cataret?
Initially preliminary plat, and then the final plat is all tidied up.
And part of that packet, as I recall, includes elevations, and it would show some evidence of where stormwater would typically run off and what the mitigation attempts would be on the part of the developer. Am I correct, sir?
That's correct, part of the stormwater study.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Could please have the first reading of Bill 3573 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3573 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, establishing procedures and requirements relating to construction and deployment of small wireless facilities.
Thank you. This also requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing at this time and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Bill 3573 proposes the 32nd Amendment to our Unified Development Code. This is regarding small wireless facilities. A text amendment does require a public hearing. which was scheduled for this evening. Want to enter into the record our growth management plan, the Unified Development Code, notice of publication in the Journal, and the staff report submitted to council. Back in 2018, the Missouri legislature passed the Uniform Small Wireless Facility Deployment Act. This act was passed to provide guidance to the city regarding the installation of small wireless facilities, utility poles located within the city right-of-way or upon private property. After the legislative action, the Missouri Municipal League followed up with a model ordinance to be used as a template by Missouri municipalities. Our UDC amendment does incorporate the language from that model ordinance. Our code amendment would establish these facilities as permitted by right in all of our zoning districts except our single-family residential neighborhoods. The facilities, again, would be affixed to city utility poles, existing city utility poles. They'll also have the right to install new poles if necessary. There will be permit requirements for the use of our right-of-way and the schedule of fees. If this amendment is approved, there'll be a follow-up, a resolution to amend our schedule of fees that would establish those permit requirements, both for the initial installation as well as annual cost for having the facilities in our right-of-way. The overall appearance of these facilities, they are being deployed, and it is for 5G technology, kind of the next wave of cellular technology. These facilities are small. They can be no larger than 6 cubic feet in volume. Usually they're 1 by 1 by 6 feet tall, attached to the utility pole. They cannot extend any higher than 10 feet above the utility pole. The idea is that you really, over time, you won't notice them. The Planning Commission has submitted proposed findings of fact on the text amendment. Under staff comments, do note that the law actually would allow the city to adopt these regulations after an application is filed in response to an application. We have not seen any applications, but rather than wait, we thought it was best to be proactive, utilize the model ordinance. Our regulations are very similar to other communities that have adopted the ordinance, Lee's Summit being one of them. So we're following in the same vein and thought it's best to be consistent with what others are doing. The Planning Commission on September 1st did vote 9-0 to accept the findings of fact and forward this amendment to the council with the recommendation of approval. And again, I included the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of the discussion they had on the agenda item. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions of staff? Mr. Holman?
Mr. Cataret, do these items require proximity to a cell tower, or are they a standalone item?
They are distinct from that. It's a different technology that's being utilized, so they're separate from the tower.
They don't need a cell tower to bounce the signal off of?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know how all the technology works, but these are independent and they're much closer than what the cell phone towers are. It uses a different wavelength.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in case you were wondering, 4G technology has about a 10-mile range from line of sight. So on those taller towers, they can talk and convey the signal. 5G is much more complicated and has to have 1,000 feet between the different cells. So it's almost like a very crowded grid of those things. So it is, you're going to see a lot of them out there. Yeah. Anything else for Mr. Cataret? Nope. Okay, I will open it up to the public at this time, and if anybody from the public would like to address the City Council on this particular topic, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and I'd ask I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3573, the 32nd Amendment to the Unified Development Code.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3573. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Thank you. Could I please have just a reading of Resolution 20-51?
The reading of Resolution 20-51 by title only, an ordinance in support of the application to the Missouri Housing Development Commission for financing Sunset Acres in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Dan Sanders, who's representing Mako Development Company, LLC, is proposing to develop a 60-unit affordable senior housing development on the east side of Johnston Parkway, north of 58, actually directly north of the Springing Up Daycare Facility. It proposes to call this development Sunset Acres. It's a proposed one-story villa style apartment community. It's consisting of 2-bedroom units. The amenities would include a clubhouse, gazebo, picnic area, park benches. It is an age-restricted community, so at least one tenant in the unit must be at least 55 years of age. The zoning of the property is currently R3B, which does support apartment use of the property. If he does receive approval of the funding, the next step would be site plan approval. At your work session on September 21st, there was discussion of location of the clubhouse, discussion of maybe some additional parking for the clubhouse, et cetera. Those items can be investigated and dealt with by the applicant and would be discussed at the site plan review and approval that is required for the Planning and Zoning Commission as the final step. I note that local support for the development is an important criteria in gaining approval of the application by the Commission. So Resolution 20-51 indicates City Council support for the application. I skipped over, but I should note the application specifically is for the developer proposing to utilize what is called the low-income housing tax credit process in the state, which does require approval from the Missouri Development Commission. So the resolution of support from the council is a factor that the commission would consider in his funding request. So that's why he is here this evening. If you have any questions of him, that concludes staff report.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions of staff? Mr. Sanders, would you care to step forward and address the council at this time? I know you had some good information that you provided to us at the Planning and Zoning.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I have no other information or comments. I'm just here to answer any questions anybody might have had that since I made my address last week.
Okay. Well, these folks didn't get to see or hear your description of the project itself. I thought maybe you might want to go over that a little bit again. You've seen it?
Work session.
At the work session, okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Okay,
I
thank
appreciate you. Okay. That's right. I was thinking of Planning and Zoning. You guys got me going to too many meetings, huh? Not really. Okay, so I would entertain a motion at this time to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve Resolution 2051, support of application for MHDC for Sunset Acres.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. The motion's been made and seconded to approve Resolution 20-51. Any further discussion? Yes, Ms. Abdel, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on your forgetfulness note, I'll just share with other people, we probably won't have much discussion on this tonight, but if people are interested in learning more about it, they can definitely check out last week's work session to find out what this is all about. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And it is in our packet tonight if you care to pull that up on your computer as well. Nobody has anything else? All those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Thank you. Okay, please have the first reading of Bill 3574 by title only.
The first reading of Bill 3574 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing an amendment to the fiscal year 2020 capital budget.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Mustine to make a staff report on this item.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight's budget amendment is asking to reallocate additional or funding left over from the Memorial Park Arboretum lights to help fund enhancements at the depot associated with the ice rink. And one thing we noticed last year as we were in our trial run of the ice rink is that the temporary fencing that we tried to use last year was ultimately not going to be safe for users and not provide the structure that we needed. So tonight's proposal is to manufacture the steel railings that match the side that already has them and put them on the depot. In addition, it also includes custom-made windscreens. If the council remember last year, as you drove by, you saw a snow fence around the ice rink. That's to help debris and stuff from getting in the ice. These windscreens will do a much better job of that. Plus, being black, it'll help control temperature in there. And then finally, this includes padding, kind of like underneath the backboard or wrapped around a volleyball net, just safety padding that kind of sits like saddlebags over the railings, just as folks are skating and stuff, so that the railings aren't such a blunt force if they run into it like you would at a skating rink or something. But we want to utilize the funding left over from that, and that concludes staff report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Yes, Ms. Abdel-Gawad.
Just a quick question. Is the windscreen something that you can use year after year? That's a reusable, not a one-time use?
Yes, ma'am. The windscreens and the pads can be used until the weather has just deteriorated them, and then we'll reorder.
Anyone else? If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve Bill 3574, Budget Amendment Depot Enhancements.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3574. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. We're now to the public comment section of our meeting. Anyone that would care to address the council at this time, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Mr. Zur, how are you back there? Haven't heard from you tonight. Oh, good. Seeing nothing, no one will move on to mayor and council communication. I'll start with, who did I start with last time? I forget. Oh, Ms. Abdel-Gawad, we'll start with you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berenson.
Probably the same for me, Mr. Mayor. Anybody watching is probably tuned out for the Chiefs game anyway, so I'll
Good
delay my
point.
comments to the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Holman.
One short item, sir. If the council could decide which restaurant they would like to go to, and if staff could take care of us by notifying Councilmember Circo and posting the meeting, he will be buying dinner for us next Monday night after our work session.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to thank Parks and Rec for putting together kind of an intercity volleyball league. I don't know if, well, that's the way it's been done in the past, but with things as they are, I'm sure there's a lower amount of people participating, but we had some wonderful games in the RAC last weekend, and it was very nice. Appreciated having the ability for those girls to play.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jacobson.
Mr. Mayor, I will join everyone else in making sure that we can get out of here in time to see that wonderful sporting event. So I will cede my time to Councilman Townsend.
Mr. Townsend.
Well, seeing now I have 35 minutes to ask. I'm just joking. I have nothing this evening, sir.
Thank you. I have nothing either, and so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
That's me.
Okay.
Sorry. I motion that we adjourn for the city council meeting this evening.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded for adjournment. No discussion? Everybody in favor?